Hello everybody and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today I am going to show you a short conversation I had with amateur YouTube young earth creationist, self-styled health guru, biblical cryptocurrency pusher, and raw honey aficionado Rawmatt. Yes, that Rawmatt. That took place on an open mic show on the Standing for Truth Young Earth Creationist YouTube ministry and channel in September of 2023. And if you know the channel and people involved, before you say anything, yes, I know, I can't help myself, I'm trying to improve, just try to enjoy this video. I'm showing you this conversation for two reasons. One, dunking on Rawmatt is fun. Let's just be honest, it's a fun pastime. Rawmatt has a history of dishonesty and misogyny. For example, he took a video, an interview that I appeared in one time, and he dishonestly edited it to make it look like I said the opposite of what I actually said. So making Rawmatt look kind of dumb is fun. But second, and more important, I want to use this conversation to illustrate a broader point. And that broader point is this. Professional young earth creationists do their audience a disservice by making bad, easy-to-refute arguments. Professional young earth creationists mostly don't interact with professional biologists. In fact, many of them actively avoid real biologists. There are a few exceptions out there. Dr. Michael Behe, for example, who's not a young earth creationist, but he is a creationist, Dr. Michael Behe has a history of long engagements with his critics, which is to be commended. More recently, as I record this in early February of 2024, Dr. Rob Carter has, over the recent past, been doing a lot of actual engagement with real biologists. And again, that's to be commended. But those are the exceptions. The vast majority of young earth creationists not only don't engage with actual scientists in the field in which they put out their work, but they have no interest in doing so. That's not the point of what they do. That's not their audience. Right? Their main audience is non-scientist young earth creationists who already agree with their starting position of a young earth and I'll say a literal, according to them, interpretation of Genesis. The problem here is that those non-scientists then turn around and propagate those arguments more broadly. But as soon as they run into an informed anti-creationist or even an informed non-creationist, the arguments fall flat, because they're built on obviously wrong claims that were neither tested against actual peer review nor designed to withstand rigorous review. This short exchange is an example of what happens when amateur young earth creationists take these arguments from the pros and encounter someone who knows better. What happens here in this clip I'm about to show you is that Rawmatt brings up Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson's Y-chromosome mutation rates. Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson is he has legitimate credentials. He has a PhD from Harvard. He's currently employed as a research scientist at Answers in Genesis, and he used a few different papers to generate Y-chromosome mutation rates that he claims lead to the conclusion of a young Earth and a recent origins for humanity. These arguments appeared in his 2022 book, Traced. So Rawmatt takes these arguments, basically just cut and paste these arguments from Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, but he doesn't know the techniques that Jeanson actually used to calculate these mutation rates. And that's by design. Jeanson doesn't want his primary non-scientific audience to know all the details. He actually does describe his methodology for these calculations, but he does so not in this book Traced, intended for a wide audience, but in one of his fake papers in the fake Answers in Genesis research journal called Answers Research Journal. That particular paper has 4 people read that total, and I'm one of them, and Jeanson's one of them. In the book Traced, intended for a wider audience, he just says, this study found this mutation rate, and leaves it at that. And then his audience turns around and tries to parrot Jeanson's talking points, and here's what happens. Take a look.
Matt, appreciate all the work that you and Donnie are doing. I was reading the article from SciTech Daily the other day regarding the sequencing of the human Y chromosome. Can you tell me they were saying that it has finally been totally sequenced, adding 30 million new base pairs to the human Y chromosome and 41 million protein producing genes. Can you speak to that? Because I had thought that there was, because they were saying in the article that there had been years and years and years of non areas that were unsequenced. And then I'm thinking that this is another nail in the coffin of the atheists and evolutionists claiming that the DNA is non-functional and junk DNA.
Sure. Yeah, basically, they did sequence the Y chromosome quite a while ago, but when they did the pedigree studies for it, they didn't scan it more than one time. So when they did the first two pedigree sequence, they had just scanned it once, and they said, there's not very many mutations there. And so the latter two mutation rate studies that were done, they scanned it multiple times, and they had found more mutation rates in it. Whether or not we're talking about functional regions or not, that really didn't come into play. They were just literally looking for mutations that were missed in earlier pedigree studies. And frankly, there's only been about 4 total, maybe 5 maximum ever on the Y chromosome. So there hasn't been too many. Now the mitochondria, that's been done a lot over time. That's harder to find mutations in though, because it's 16,500 base pairs here around. Y chromosome's massive. A whole lot bigger. So it was a lot harder to sequence by like thousands of base pairs. So
yeah. Because this was saying that the group was called Telomere to Telomere out of California, and the lady that was running it was named Karen Mig, M-I-G-A, and according to what I was reading in that article, it was just recently completely sequenced by this group.
Well, that's good, because that's how we're going to determine whether or not, like Neanderthal and Denisovan, all these other so-called subhumans or missing links are correlated with human beings, right? Because if they are coming before a bottleneck, but we find the same sequence, then that means they were after the most recent bottleneck. So that's good. Hopefully they can keep sequencing more, and we can find even more of in the fossil record and find better DNA. That's Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson's specialty. He loves that. That's his area of expertise. I wish we could get him on here. AIG is just so tough getting their guests to join anything.
Yeah. Well, when adding 30 million base pairs, because again, they were saying there was large areas of the Y chromosome that had never been sequenced. 30 million base pairs. Isn't that a lot?
Yeah, well, the total is what, 59 million base pairs in the Y chromosome total. So yeah, that's about half. So that's an incredible amount. That's a really good find. I didn't know. When was this paper out, by the way?
This paper came out, and I think I sent a copy to a link to Donnie, but I was reading it. It was it popped up on my feed as of like August 28th, 29th, somewhere around there, and it was SciTech Daily.
Oh wow, 19. Dan must know about this. He's raising his hand. He must have heard of this.
I mean, no. I know the papers you're referring to, though. It's the 4 that Jeanson cites in his Y chromosome paper for Answers Research Journal.
Right.
The 2 that you're referring to that had fewer mutations, it's not that the coverage was insufficient. They had about 15 times coverage, each of them, which is fine. It's the amount of it's the fact that they were looking at pedigrees that spanned multiple generations. So like they were 150 to 250 years rather than one generation. And over that time span, you have selection and drift operating that remove some of the variation. So Jeanson rejects those, not because, I mean, he uses coverage as an excuse. It was about 15 versus 40 for the other 2. But he buries the lead that the actual methodological difference between the 2 was that the 2 that showed the slower mutation rate, i.e. fewer mutations, there was multiple generations rather than just one. And the 2 that had the higher mutation rate, i.e. fewer mutations, was over a single generation.
But that doesn't. That's not good usually. That's not good though. You usually want to go back as far as you can on pedigree studies. From
I
what I've
know.
learned.
That's why he should put more weight on the two that have more individuals. I agree. Yes, 100%.
I'll have to look into that. That's yeah. So his stuff is so technical. You gotta. It's like so many papers.
It is very
so
technical.
many papers. You got to read like 50 pages on just one study usually.
Yeah.
So
The other thing to note with the Jeanson ones is one of the two that he used that had very high coverage, which is great. You want high coverage, 40 times coverage. Give me that all day long. But one of the two papers that he used, they weren't looking at mutations. They were looking at structural differences, so like translocations. They weren't actually looking at mutations. And what he did is they created a phylogeny, the authors, and Jeanson identified father-son pairs on the phylogeny, and then the branch lengths were, there was a key with like a scale bar for like this scale bar's X number of differences. And what he did is he blew up the figure really big on his screen and then counted the pixels on the scale bar and used that along the phylogeny to figure out how many differences there were in all the father-son pairs. The authors never actually reported that because they weren't doing sequence-specific stuff. They were looking at structural differences, and the authors didn't actually do like the error. Like there's an error rate when you do DNA sequencing that you have to account for. The authors didn't do that. So the amount of mutations they found was indistinguishable from the error rate in that study.
That was on mitochondria, right?
No, that was the Y chromosome one. That was one of the two Y chromosome studies that Jeanson used as the basis for TRACE.
Oh wow, I thought that was I thought that was the mitochondria one from a
no,
long
it was
time.
It was the Y chromosome, one of the two. So he showed 4, and then he rejects 2 of them for low coverage, and he bases TRACE on the other 2. And one of those didn't actually measure the point mutation rate. The authors created a phylogeny for that based on their sequence data, but they were only sequencing to use to find structural differences. They weren't actually looking for like single nucleotide polymorphisms. And so they didn't do the typical like error correcting that you would do to account for the sloppiness in sequencing processes. So the mutation rate that Jeanson documents in that one is indistinguishable from the error rate of the DNA sequencing itself.
Interesting, because that was the final one that he did, that Marty et al. 2017, I think.
It's one of it. Maybe that one, or I forget the authors. It's that one or the other one that he cites. There's 2 that have about 40 times coverage. It's one of them, and I forget which one off the top of my head.
Got it. But before we go on more on that one, I did want to touch on the one thing you posted on the side. You put young Earth creation predicting.
So what happened there is Rawmatt was caught flat-footed because he didn't know Jeanson's methodology. And if he did, he would have known Jeanson's argument is nonsense, and he would have known better than to just repeat it. When someone explains the methodology clearly, it sounds ridiculous, which it is. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. That is not Rawmatt's fault, right? This exchange is not Rawmatt's fault. This is Jeanson's fault for making these terrible arguments and promoting them to his target audience, which again is non-scientist young Earth creationists. This is a thing professional young Earth creationists do. They make awful, easy-to-refute arguments, which does their intended audience a disservice. It could even have the unintended consequence of driving people away from the faith when they realize how weak the arguments they've been taught really are. So this was my short conversation with Rawmatt about Jeanson's Y chromosome work, which illustrates the degree to which professional young Earth creationists actually hurt their own side by seeding bad arguments among their non-scientific audience who don't know any better and therefore can't defend the shoddy work that the professionals do. Before I go, I want to thank my channel members. I recently activated channel memberships. Again, as I record this in early February of 2024, I recently activated channel memberships. So I want to thank all of my members who have joined so far, especially my new super supporter, Charles Payette. I hope I pronounced your name right, Charles. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. If you're a channel member, you get immediate access to recorded videos like this one as soon as I upload them. When I do recorded videos, I make them available every Wednesday night of every week. I upload them something like anywhere from 6 hours to a few weeks early. And if you're a member, you get access immediately. You don't have to wait for whenever the Wednesday comes around that they would be available. So with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, thank you for watching. Please remember to hit the like button down below, share this video, leave a comment, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Feed that algorithm and help more people learn why creationism is nonsense. And as always, don't get fooled.